My name is Anne Shirley. I was 11 years old when my life changed forever. I lived in many houses before that. I was an orphan. I had no parents, no brothers, and no sisters. I lived with strangers, and sometimes they were kind, but sometimes they were not. I worked hard in their homes, cleaning and taking care of children. I wanted to belong somewhere. I wanted someone to love me. One day, I was told I would go to a new home. The people who wanted me lived on Prince Edward Island. Their house was called Green Gables. It sounded like a dream to me. I thought maybe, this time, I would have a real family. When I arrived at the train station, I waited and waited. The sun was going down, and I felt scared. I held my small bag close to me. Then I saw a tall, quiet man walking toward me. He looked shy but kind. He said his name was Matthew Cuthbert. I smiled and said, "I'm Anne. Are you here for me?" He nodded slowly and said, "Yes, I came to pick up the boy." I stopped smiling. "The boy," I said. "But I'm not a boy." He looked surprised. "There must be a mistake," he said. I felt my heart drop. "Oh, please don't send me back," I said softly. "I can be very useful. I can help you in the house. I can learn anything." Matthew looked at me, and I could see he felt sorry for me. He said gently, "Well, let's go home first. My sister Marilla will know what to do." The ride from the station to Green Gables was the most beautiful ride of my life. The trees were green and full. The air smelled like flowers and fresh grass. The road went through fields and farms, and the sky was a soft pink as the sun went down. I talked all the way. I told Matthew about the names I gave to trees and rivers. I told him about my dreams and how I loved stories. He did not say much, but I could see he liked listening. When we reached Green Gables, I saw a big white house with green roofs. Flowers grew near the gate. I thought it looked like a picture from a storybook. Marilla was standing by the door. She was tall, with a serious face and sharp eyes. She looked at me, then at Matthew, and said, "Where is the boy?" Matthew said quietly, "There was no boy, only this girl." Marilla's eyebrows went up. "A girl? We asked for a boy?" I felt small and scared again. I looked at her and said, "Please, please don't send me back. I can work hard. I can do anything you want. Just let me stay." Marilla looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "We'll see about this in the morning. Come inside." That night, I could not sleep. The bed was soft and the room was beautiful, but my heart hurt. I thought Marilla would send me back the next day. I looked out of the window and saw the stars. I whispered, "Please let me stay at Green Gables. Please." In the morning, Marilla took me to Mrs. Spencer, the woman who brought me from the orphanage. Marilla said, "There's been a mistake. We wanted a boy." Mrs. Spencer said, "Oh yes, I remember. I thought this girl would be fine too. She looked sweet." Marilla sighed. "Well, She can't do farm work, she said. I stood very still and tried not to cry. Then Mrs. Spencer said, "If you don't want her, Mrs. Nia, Blewett needs a girl to help her with the house." I looked at her and felt cold inside. I had seen Mrs. Blewett. She had a hard face and loud voice. I could tell she would not be kind. I could not stop my tears. "Please don't send me there," I said. "I can be good. I can work hard. Just give me a chance." Marilla looked at me again. Her face did not change, but her eyes looked softer. "We'll go home," she said. My heart started to beat fast. When we reached Green Gables again, she told Matthew, "We'll keep her. It's too much trouble to send her away now." Matthew smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." I could not believe it. I was staying. From that day, I tried my best to help. I washed dishes, cleaned the rooms, and helped in the garden. I wanted Marilla to see I was useful. I also went to school in the village. The other children looked at me strangely at first because of my red hair and many freckles. I heard one boy, Gilbert Blythe, laugh and say, "Carrots!" I was so angry I hit him on the head with my slate. Everyone laughed, and I cried. I decided I would never speak to him again. Even though school was sometimes hard, I liked learning. I wanted to be smart and make Marilla proud. I loved reading stories and writing about the trees, the river, and the sunsets at Green Gables. I had a best friend too. Her name was Diana Barry. She lived at a big house called Orchard Slope. She had black hair and kind eyes. From the first time we met, I knew she was my bosom friend. We talked for hours, shared secrets, and laughed about everything. One day, Marilla went away to visit a friend, and I invited Diana to tea. I wanted everything to be perfect. I took out what I thought was raspberry cordial from the cupboard. We drank and laughed. But soon Diana's face turned red, and she said she felt sick. She ran home. Later that evening, her mother came to Green Gables angry. She said, "Anne made my child drunk. That was wine, not cordial." I was shocked. I had made a mistake. I cried all night. Mrs. Barry said Diana could never play with me again. I felt my heart break. I stayed alone and missed Diana so much. I wrote her letters, but she did not answer. I told Marilla I wanted to leave Green Gables. Marilla said, "No, you made a mistake, but you will stay and learn from it." I didn't want to eat or talk. The days felt long and empty without my friend. Then, one day, Diana came running to our door. Her little sister Minnie May was very sick, and her parents were not home. She was crying. "Anne, please help me," she said. I had learned a little about caring for sick people from Marilla's friend, Mrs. Allen. I ran with Diana to her house. Minnie May was pale and breathing fast. I stayed calm and helped her drink water slowly. I stayed all night, watching her until the doctor came. He said I had saved her life. The next day, Mrs. Barry came to Green Gables. She held my hands and said, "Anne, I am sorry. I was wrong about you. You are a brave, good girl. You can be Diana's friend again." I felt so happy I almost cried. I hugged Diana and said, "Now we will be friends forever." Green Gables began to feel like home to me. Marilla still looked serious, but sometimes I saw a small smile on her face. Matthew often brought me small gifts, like new ribbons for my hair. I knew he loved me, even if he didn't say it. I loved them both more than words could say. I was not just an orphan anymore. I was Anne of Green Gables. Before I continue rest of the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me where you are listening from. Your support means a lot to me. Now let's continue. Time passed quickly at Green Gables. I grew taller and older. I was now 13. I helped Marilla more, and she began to trust me with many things. I cooked breakfast, washed clothes, and looked after the garden. I also still went to school, and I wanted to be the best student there. Every morning I walked to school with Diana. The air was cool and fresh, and the road was lined with trees. We talked about everything, books, dreams, and plans for the future. Diana wanted to stay home after school and help her mother. I wanted to study more and become a teacher one day. I wanted to do something special with my life, but school was not always easy. Gilbert Blythe was still there, sitting in the front row with his bright smile. I still remembered the day he called me Carrots, and I still refused to speak to him. Everyone knew that Anne Shirley and Gilbert Blythe were enemies. But deep down, I knew he was a good student. He was clever, kind, and always helped others. Sometimes I saw him looking at me with a soft smile, but I looked away quickly. One day, the teacher said there would be a big exam. The best student would win a scholarship to study in the city at Queen's Academy. I wanted that prize more than anything. I studied late every night. Marilla told me to sleep, but I said, "Just one more page." Matthew smiled and said, "Let her dream." When the exam day came, I felt nervous. The room was quiet. Everyone wrote carefully. Gilbert sat near me, and I could hear his pencil moving fast. I told myself, I can do this. When the results came weeks later, I held my breath. I had won the scholarship. Gilbert was second. I could not believe it. I was so happy that I cried. Marilla smiled proudly, and Matthew said softly, "I knew you could." Soon it was time to go to Queen's Academy. I was 16 now. I packed my small bag and looked around my room at Green Gables. I touched the curtains and the books on my shelf. I whispered, "Goodbye, dear room. I'll be back soon." Life in the city was different. There were many students and tall buildings. I missed the quiet of Avonlea, the smell of the fields, and Marilla's voice calling me to dinner. But I studied hard. I met new friends and even saw Gilbert there too. He smiled at me once in the library, but I still didn't talk to him. Sometimes I wanted to, but my pride stopped me. At Queen's, I learned many new things. I learned literature, history, and teaching. I also learned how much I loved learning itself. When the final exams came, I worked harder than ever. A week later, the results were posted on the big notice board. I stood there shaking. My name was first. I had won the Avery Scholarship. It meant I could go to college if I wanted. That evening, I wrote a long letter to Marilla. I told her everything. I wrote, "Dear Marilla, I did it. I am first. I could not have done it without you and Matthew. I will come home soon." When I returned to Green Gables, I saw Marilla standing by the gate. She looked tired but happy. Matthew stood beside her. His hair was more gray now. I ran to them, and Matthew said, "My girl is home." It was the sweetest thing I had ever heard. But not long after that, something sad happened. One evening, Matthew went to the post office and came back with letters in his pocket. He looked pale. Marilla told him to sit down, but before she finished speaking, he fell to the floor. I ran to him and shouted, "Matthew!" But he did not answer. His heart had stopped. I could not stop crying. My hands shook and my chest hurt. I said again and again, "Oh, my dear Matthew, please don't leave me." But he was gone. Marilla sat in silence, tears falling down her face. Green Gables felt empty without him. For days I walked through the house quietly. I looked at his hat, his chair, his boots near the door. Everything reminded me of him. I missed his gentle smile and kind words. But I told myself, Matthew would want me to be strong. After some time, Marilla told me something that broke my heart again. "Anne," she said softly, "I am losing my sight. My eyes are getting worse. I may not be able to see soon." I took her hands and said, "Then I will take care of you. You took care of me. Now it's my turn." I decided not to go to college. I would stay at Green Gables with Marilla. I wrote to Queens and told them I was giving up my place. It was hard, but I knew it was right. I found a teaching job at the school in Avonlea. The salary was small, but I could live at home and help Marilla. On my first day as a teacher, I felt both proud and nervous. I stood in front of the class, and the children looked at me with wide eyes. I remembered how I used to sit in that same room, full of dreams and mistakes. Now I was the one teaching. I told them, "You can be anything you want if you work hard and stay kind." Diana still came to visit me every week. We drank tea and talked by the window, just like old times. She was soon engaged to a kind man named Fred Wright. I was happy for her, but I also felt a small ache inside. My life was different, quieter, but still full of love. One evening, as I walked home from school, I saw Gilbert waiting near the gate. He looked older and calmer. He said, "Hello, Anne." I stopped and looked at him for a moment. It was the first time I had spoken to him in years. I said quietly, "Hello, Gilbert." He smiled and said, "I heard you are teaching here now. I wanted to tell you. I gave up my school place in Avonlea so you could have it. I'll be teaching at White Sands instead." I was surprised. "You gave it up for me?" I asked. He nodded. "Yes. I thought you might want to stay close to Marilla." For a long moment we stood there in silence. I felt my heart change. The old anger I had carried for years started to melt away. I said softly, "Thank you, Gilbert. That was very kind." He smiled again and said, "I always wanted to be friends, Anne." That night, as I sat by the window, I looked at the stars above Green Gables. The air was still, and the fields were quiet. I thought about Matthew, Marilla, Diana, and even Gilbert. I realized how much love there was in my life, even after all the pain. I whispered to myself, maybe happiness is not about having everything. Maybe it is about being where you are loved. Green Gables was my home, and I was no longer the lonely orphan who came by mistake. I was Anne Shirley, teacher, dreamer, and girl of Green Gables. Summer came again to Green Gables. The fields were full of flowers, and the air smelled sweet and warm. I walked every morning to the small school where I taught. The children ran to me, smiling, and shouted, "Good morning, Miss Shirley!" Their happy faces made me smile back. Teaching was not easy, but I loved it. Each child was different, and I wanted them all to believe in themselves. I often told them, "If you make a mistake, do not worry. Just try again." At home, Marilla's eyes grew weaker. She could not see small things anymore, so I helped her with everything. I read letters to her, cooked meals, and took care of the house. Sometimes I felt tired, but I never complained. I wanted her to rest and feel safe. She often said, "Anne, I do not know what I would do without you." I would answer, "You will never have to find out." Diana got married in the fall. The wedding was small but beautiful. She looked like a princess in her white dress. When I hugged her, I whispered, "I will miss you every day." She smiled and said, "You will come to visit, won't you?" I nodded, but my heart felt heavy. I was happy for her, but a little sad for myself. I went home that night and sat by the window. The moon was bright, and the house was quiet. I thought about how much had changed since I first came to Green Gables. I was not a child anymore. A few weeks later, Gilbert came to visit. I saw him walking up the path with a book in his hand. Marilla said softly, "He's a fine young man, that one." When I opened the door, he smiled and said, "Good afternoon, Anne. I hope I'm not disturbing you." I told him he never did. We sat outside under the big tree near the garden. The wind moved through the leaves, and the sky was clear blue. Gilbert told me about his school at White Sands. He said the students were clever but sometimes lazy. We laughed about it. Then he said, "Anne, I was sorry about Matthew. He was a good man." I looked down and said, "Yes, he was. I still miss him every day." Gilbert's eyes were kind. He said, "He was proud of you. You know that, don't you?" I nodded. We sat quietly for a moment, and then he said, "I'm glad we're friends again. I smiled. So am I. After that day, Gilbert often visited. Sometimes he brought books, and we talked about stories and poems. Sometimes we walked along the river or through the fields. We talked about dreams, about the future, and about life. I noticed I was happy when he was near. His voice was calm, and his eyes were warm. The world felt lighter when he was around. One evening, we walked home from school together. The sun was setting, and the sky was pink and gold. Gilbert said quietly, "Anne, I want to tell you something." My heart began to beat faster. He looked at me and said, "You have always been important to me, since the first day I met you." I laughed softly and said, "Since the day you called me carrots?" He smiled. "Even then," he said, "I was foolish, but I never stopped caring." I didn't know what to say. For a moment we both stood there in silence. The wind moved through the trees, and the sound of the river was soft and low. I looked at him and said, "You are very dear to me too, Gilbert." His eyes shone. "Then maybe one day," he started to say, but I stopped him. "Not yet," I said gently. "I need time to think. But thank you." He smiled and said, "I can wait." And I believed he could. That night, I sat outside on the steps. The stars were bright, and the air was cool. I thought about everything that had happened in my life. I thought about the lonely girl who once came to Green Gables by mistake. I thought about Marilla and Matthew, about Diana, and about Gilbert. My heart was full of memories. Marilla came to sit beside me. "You're quiet tonight," she said. I smiled and said, "Just thinking, Marilla, about how lucky I am." She touched my hand and said, "You made your own luck, Anne. You worked hard, and you loved well." I looked at the dark fields and said softly, "I used to dream about big things, about cities and adventures. But now, I see the best adventure was here all along." Marilla smiled. "Home often is." The next morning, I woke early. The sun was shining, and the birds were singing. I stood by the window and looked out at the trees, the fields, and the river. Everything looked golden. I whispered, "Good morning, Green Gables." Later that day, I walked to school again. The road was the same, but I was different. I was no longer the little girl who dreamed of being loved. I had found love in friends, in family, and in this beautiful place. I had learned that even when life is sad, there is always hope. As I reached the school gate, I saw Gilbert waiting there, holding a small bunch of flowers. He smiled and said, "For the best teacher in Avonlea." I laughed, took the flowers, and said, "Thank you, Gilbert." He looked at me and said quietly, "And for the girl who changed everything." I felt my heart grow warm. I looked back at Green Gables, standing tall and peaceful in the distance. The sun touched its roof, and it shone like something alive. I whispered, "Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Marilla. Thank you for giving me a home." The wind moved gently through the fields. I walked toward the school, smiling. My life had not been easy, but it had been full of love, full of lessons, and full of beauty. I knew that wherever I went next, Green Gables would always be with me. Because it was not just a place. It was where I became who I was meant to be. I was Anne Shirley, dreamer, teacher, and girl of Green Gables. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to English Medium Stories. Stay with us for more classic stories in easy English.